You're listening to the Forest School podcast with Lewis Ames and Gemma Southerden.
And a massive thanks to our current patrons Simon Kenny, Joe H, Brona Steed, Jude Vincent and Chrissy McEvoy. Thank you so much, guys. It really does mean a lot.
Cool.
There we go.
Yeah, we'll just say your full names, like when there's two people with the same name in a primary school classroom, and you go, Sarah W. Sarah L.
Sarah L.
Yeah, I'll just make the name go, Sarah Walker, like it's one name.
Oh, yeah.
That sounds so cool.
Smooth.
Now that we've started, can I start with a question? Because I am the only person here.
Before.
What?
Well, because people listening won't know who we're talking to.
Well, that's what I'm going to say.
Okay.
I'm going to do that in a smooth transition.
And I've made it real clunky now.
Yeah, man. Always. No.
Cool.
So I'm here, you're here,
I'm here.
And we've got Sarah Walker and Sarah Lawful with us, who are both Forest School practitioners. And Sarah Lawful is also the new chair of the Forest School Association. And Sarah Walker, you're helping out as a volunteer to arrange and organise the Forest School Association conference. Am I right?
I'm doing a very little bit towards it. Yes, there are a lot of people who are doing a lot more than me.
Okay, cool. That's fine. We've got the context of this conversation. Mm-hmm. And I'm the only person in this group of 4 people who is not kind of involved in the FSA. So as a kind of little beginning part, can I ask all of you, like, how did you end up becoming involved in the Forest School Association, and so what does it mean to you? Why do you find it important? Why? Because you're obviously donating your time and your expertise and your energy to it, and why is that? Why do you feel that it's valuable? And let's start with Sarah Lawful.
Okay, hello. I think the thing about the FSA that I love so much is it's a group of people really committed to developing their professional practice with Forest School and promoting Forest School as a valuable, vital part of every child and young person's experience. And I think the other thing for me is we're all learning together and from each other. So I know there are people in the FSA who are using Forest School with teenagers, with adults with learning difficulties or mental health issues. There are brilliant people now using Forest School with veterans, which I find fascinating. So we kind of all get to learn together and learn off each other. And I love that. I really love that.
Cool. Thank you. And I'm going to switch to Lewis next.
That's me.
Yeah.
Well, I think... honestly, I think I started thinking it was more of a shield, maybe. But I had just started and found this new thing. But I was acutely aware from day dot that there were other people doing, I'm using air quotes, Forest School. And that I was like, well, how do I differentiate that what I'm doing is like really good Forest School? And so I think I sort of found it there. But I think that would be at that peak point of, when you learn something new and you think you know loads, and then there's that big dip where you go, oh, actually, I know absolutely nothing. And then it starts to swing back up.
The learning pit.
So I think that was at the peak of my, what's the word, naivety. Mm-hmm. And then the longer I've been doing it and the more it's gone on, I think I'm going through that pit. But now I've kind of realised that it is just such a, like Sarah said, a valuable tool. And I want to, one, keep preserving it, but also be sharing good practice and be making it more accessible. For me, that's my thing that I think the FSA can be a really good vehicle for, is getting the Forest School ethos to places that it hasn't, it sort of naturally permeates one area of society, and now it's kind of like reaching out and going, okay, can we get it here? Can it be useful here? And seeing what it can do.
Yeah, and people hear the term and that spreads in terms of that phrase, Forest School, people know what it is, but the FSA, you think, can kind of transmit the actual deeper meaning of what it is and help to advertise that. Cool. And Sarah Walker, how about you?
I suppose I found out about the Forest School Association when I started my training as a Forest School leader. So when I was looking for training, then I chose a training course that was supported by the Forest School Association. So I suppose that was really the first thing, as you saying, Lewis, to sort of differentiate between how do you know what's good, and there's a lot of other training out there which is good and isn't necessarily Forest School Association, but I suppose that for me was one way of thinking about where are you putting your money and your time. I think for me now, it professionalizes what we're doing, I think, and so there's that side of it. So it is a career, it's not a hobby, it's not a part-time sort of thing you just do. It is a serious, we're doing serious work. And I think also for me, it's a way of bringing together, it's almost like a virtual staff room really, I suppose, because a lot of us work alone in schools. Perhaps we don't have that staff room that certainly I was used to in my previous life of a classroom teacher with colleagues. So for me, it's almost like a sort of a staff room where you can talk to people, share ideas, have a bit of banter. If you meet up face to face, it's got that. So there's that side of it as well, and it just brings together such a wide group of people really from such different backgrounds.
Yeah. Sticking with you, Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about your kind of journey into, you mentioned being a classroom teacher before. Can you tell us a bit about your journey to working outdoors and what your career encompasses now? Yeah,
so now I'm a freelance Forest School leader, but I spent 20 years, I think, as an indoor classroom-based teacher. So in working in languages and teacher training. So I've spent most of my teaching life abroad, training teachers to teach English effectively in their mainstream schools, in their universities. So I worked in international schools and for the British Council in various countries, really, and ended up coming back to the UK unexpectedly, perhaps is the best word. And from there, I was teacher training. I was writing for some language publishers, but wasn't really happy being indoors and wanted to get outdoors. And I'd always, been fairly adventurous. We'd always biked and hiked and camped our way around the world in the countries we'd lived in and been involved in sort of outdoor activities a lot. And I went along to my daughter's school and as a parent helper, I went to Forest School with her. That was in 2012. And then a few years later, started my training and here we are. Oh, wow. So, I work in a couple of local primary schools, which are recognised providers. That's that. And I'm now training with Sarah.
Great.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Find out about CPD courses at childrenoftheforest.com. Check out the podcast links for more details.
And Sarah Lawful, we've had you on the podcast before, but ages ago. So those people who haven't listened to that episode or it's so far away they can't remember, do you want to give us a brief intro to your work and your journey?
Thank you. I was a teacher and I ended up in early years, which I absolutely loved. And then I discovered Forest School, and the impact of Forest School on the children, the families and my colleagues was so huge that I quickly realised it was too important just to be doing it in my school. And I was very fortunate that Vari, who has been really helping organise and will be running the conference, Vari in the Oxfordshire Forest School Service was kindly having a baby. So I got to cover her maternity leave. So I had a secondment from my teaching post. And I loved being doing full-time Forest School. So I just didn't go back to teaching. And I escaped to the woods. And I've kind of been there on and off ever since. And I realised quite quickly when I was working with the Forest School people for the county council that it was teaching teachers and getting adults to understand the real benefits of Forest School that for me got me super passionate, because I realised we could impact far more children that way by actually sort of sharing the Forest School pedagogy. And that just got me so excited. So I very quickly got involved in Forest School training. When I left working for the county council, I set up on my own to set up Where the Fruit Is, to kind of explore whether I was going to do training, lots of training, whether I was going to carry on developing the work with autistic young people, or just find out what was needed, I think. And so it's been an exciting adventure. And then becoming involved in the FSA as a director and now as a chair, that for me is kind of, well, I still can't quite believe it sometimes, and it feels like a huge task. I feel I have two very wonderful people to follow, and occasionally feel very unequal to that task. But I see the whole forest school world and the forest school message as being about building community, about finding the really great things in individual people, and then how do we use that? How do we encourage people to bring their skills and their passions and their interests to the work that we're doing with children and young people out in the woods? And so if in the role as chair, I'm able to help people do that, I'd feel in a year or two, I was starting to do the job well. So I'm really delighted to be given this opportunity to work with Gareth and the team, and to be, hopefully serving the members in ways that help us all together look at how do we respond to the pandemic and to all of the challenges that schools are facing. I think we've got a massive task ahead of us. But knowing the members of the FSA who I know, I just think what incredible people they are and what amazing skills and brilliance they bring to the forest school community. So I think between us, we stand a really good chance of sharing forest school in ways that can change outcomes for people, and that's really hopeful.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if that answers any of your questions.
Yeah.
Do you know what? That's kind of interesting, isn't it? Like, as I was just listening to the story, and I was thinking back about other people that we've had on and who've gone through, I did this and I did this, and then there must be a word for it, where this tipping point where you go from, I've done my training and I'm doing one session a week, and this is, the same as like if you're a primary school teacher like I was, you could go, all right, it's like I can teach PE. I teach all the other lessons and I do PE once a week. And then there's a certain point on the scale where it tips over and you go, oh, this is actually my whole life philosophy. This is how and then people go, and I just couldn't go back after that. I
can't do both.
I've not heard of anybody who goes, it tipped over. It was this whole life philosophy. I did it full time. And then I went back into state teaching, or I went back into... Do you know what I mean?
We talk about that sometimes, don't we? Because I sometimes have daydreams that I do go. I taught secondary.
Of leaving me.
No, going back, I taught English and drama in secondary school. So you might think that's really far removed from forest school, but knowing what I know now, it sounds really like big-headed and arrogant, like I know everything. I don't mean that at all. I mean kind of like having done the journey that I've done in education and holistic learning and just learning about what it is to be human, I feel like if I could go back into the classroom and bring that knowledge and understanding into the kind of teaching that most young people get, a huge percentage of them. Do you know what I mean? And like, I'd be such a better teacher that I almost want to go and try it out, even though it would probably be impossible because the system is so rigid and structured that a lot of the things which is basically why I left. I was like, well, I don't feel morally comfortable with the way that I'm asking young people to be and behave and that kind of thing. But yeah, Sarah Walker,
I think that for me as well, that sort of tipping point was realizing that actually the common theme for me between whether it was teacher training, European teachers who are teaching English back in their primary school classrooms or whatever, or doing some forest school when I was kind of in between two and hadn't quite made the complete transfer across. I think for me, it was that point where I realized that this is all just about being human, and whether you're teaching language, which is, a very human thing, that's what sets us apart from other mammals, isn't it? And it's that sort of human language connection. I've always been fascinated by languages and that sort of thing, and that human connection with the children and the adults that I was working with, and actually seeing that it's not two completely different worlds. There's a lot of crossover, making those connections with people to communicate effectively in forest school or in the classroom through a foreign language. And I think that for me was that point where I realised, no, this is bigger than, lighting fires and toasting marshmallows, which of course it's always good fun, but there's so much more to it.
Yeah. I was just wondering if I could segue there from like connecting with people to talk a bit about the Forest School Association conference, which is, the date is in October, isn't it? It's October the 1st.
Don't look at me.
Friday,
look at these guys.
Saturday.
I'm going to be quiet.
The second and 3rd of October. And can you guys tell us a little bit about like the theme of the conference and its aims this year?
Can I dive in with that one, Sarah?
Please do.
So 2 years ago, everybody was talking about the climate emergency and the tricky things children and young people were facing. The Good Childhood Report had come out, and there were some really worrying statistics about children and mental health. And we were all talking about that. And there was discussion about climate anxiety 2 years ago. And so the Climate of Hope Sustainable Forest School was born as an idea to really look at tying together all the brilliant things that are happening at Forest School that empower children, give young people agency, engage them with community and landscape, and really sort of understanding their connection, our connection to nature, that we are nature, that whole conversation that's happening at Forest School that maybe isn't happening in other places within education. So that was kind of mulling over and started to plan. And then we hit the pandemic and everybody was separate and sort of locked in and disconnected. Back to, Sarah's earlier comments about connection and being human, we suddenly found all those things that we were not able to do that make us feel human and make us feel connected. And the going outside into nature, more and more people were realizing how important that was. And at the same time, we were seeing how impossible that was for many, many people. So disadvantaged children, families from low socioeconomic groups, black families, different ethnic groups. And so there was that real understanding that the hope that maybe we could offer is offered through nature and all those things, that suddenly all that was stopped. And for many children, they weren't getting to Forest School, they weren't going to school. So in a way that kind of gave fire to the earlier passion for the theme of the conference. And we realized that it was going to be needed more than ever. And around the time of the pandemic, we'd started having good conversations with the Children's Forest, and we were talking with the National Forest around the Community Forest and Woodland Outreach Project. And so this real vision for a conference that would look at how tree planting and creating forest school sites and promoting biodiversity can offer children and young people and their families and teachers a sense of hope and a sense of agency. So really engaging with developing and promoting ecosystems and all of that. So that's where the theme came from. And having the good links that we do in Oxfordshire with Earthwatch and with many other organisations, as well as a really strong Forest School Association affiliated group. So there are many people in that group who are very knowledgeable about sustainability and have worked in sustainability throughout their lives. So it just feels like a really valuable place to be at this point in time in history. And there's so many brilliant local people involved in big national stuff around sustainability. So Kate Raworth, who wrote Donut Economics and came up with all that, she's local. Unfortunately, she's not coming to the conference, but we do have who is so well known to many people looking at the issues around the climate emergency and global heating and all of. So I think it's a great time for this message. I've talked a lot, forgive me. Let me hand over to Sarah. You are writing the quiz.
Oh, yes. Yes, the pub quiz.
Oh,
well up for a pub quiz.
Yeah, because I listened to your podcast Christmas with the naughty mushrooms that you were talking about.
Oh, yeah.
That
Does
was
that
a
mean we know
classic.
the answers?
You might know the answers to some of them. I might have just pilfered the odd mushroom or two from that quiz for the Forest Book.
Oh, really?
Oh, well, there you go. Well, there you go. If people are coming to the conference, they've got to go back and listen to
Yeah,
all the
this
other
is the Christmas
episodes.
podcast. Absolutely.
Ideal. I think that is, definitely a thing that's, as you say, Sarah, the last 2 years, we kind of realised that need for connection and community. And that's, I think, something that we're all in different places at the moment. Some people are absolutely chomping at the bit, desperate to go back, reconnect. There's a really strong need. Some people taking more cautious steps. I think meeting in a big outdoor environment with lots of people that understand the benefits of being outdoors, and sort of connecting with, as you were saying, Terry Walker, about the sort of staff room element of people we all know what each other have been through to a degree. We're talking, I was just saying to you the other week, there was, I don't know if you guys remember, there was a few weeks where we were all convinced, because that's what the research said, that this was mostly transmitted by touch. And so we were all going mental, going, how do you wipe down ropes? How do you deal with hammocks? And then it seemed to go like that. And suddenly went, oh no, it's airborne. And so
let's all get outside.
Let's all get outside. And so we've all had this thing. So we've all been on this journey the last 2 years, and just a chance to kind of meet back up and go, almost just go, oh, that was fucking rough, wasn't it? It will be, really beneficial to a lot of people.
It depends massively on what your experience has been over the last year or so as well, though, doesn't it? Because, I mean, I've fortunately been able to carry on working with priority children groups in 2 of the schools I work in. But I know that there are colleagues who have had no earnings from Forest School in the last year and a half because they're, the schools, for whatever reason, the way the schools were reorganising their lockdown work and all that sort of thing. So there'll be people who are sort of ready to meet up because they've perhaps feel more comfortable because they've been carried on working, and there'll be people who've been at home and not been able to go out and work. So I think that's going to have a big influence for people as well.
Yeah, and whatever your kind of state of career has been through it, definitely. We used to go to the local Forest School Association kind of networking meetup groups, and they were a seasonal thing that sort of marked the calendar and were just a really amazing way to reconnect and check in with each other and share skills and talk about what it's like to do the job that we do, because a lot of the time it is, we're lucky that we work with each other, but it can be very lonely. Even if you're working in a school, sometimes I've heard people say that you're the kind of weirdo in inverted commas,
Definitely.
We've had people come to see us in the woods and go, this is amazing because you guys are all weirdos too. So I have to leave the circle of weirdos and go back to the staff room, whatever. And yeah, I've really missed those, just, even small, like local Forest School Association networking. And to kind of go back, and this will be the first big conference that I would have been to. And just the array of people will be really amazing. We kind of wanted to talk a little bit about kind of general like CPD with you guys as well. Broad, isn't it? The CPD available to a forest school practitioner, you can really delve deep into such a wide variety of topics. Things kind of going, I want to do something, I feel a little bit stale, or I feel slightly itchy that I want to learn a new skill, I don't really know where to start. So, can anyone recommend? And the responses are often like, try so-and-so, they live in Nottinghamshire and they run a great course on how to sharpen knives. It's so like niche and particular. It just happens to be who you know. So I kind of feel like this conference will be an amazing...
It's like a tasting platter.
Yeah.
Like just going around, all these people that are kind of pulled together.
Yeah, and you could have like psychology stuff at one end of the spectrum and like, knife sharpening at the other, and everything in between.
That's sort of the nature of the work, though, isn't it? That's what I find with, 1 minute you're, negotiating fees with your head teacher or a contract, and the next minute you're thinking about your ecological impact assessment, and the next minute you're thinking about the neurodiverse children you're working with and the brain development of 3-year-olds. And I think it is such a massively varied job that's what's so brilliant about it, that it does bring so many different people and skills and together. That a conference could only be that varied. The buffet that it's offering, by its nature, will be that varied, I think.
Yeah, I described it to someone the other day as they were talking about a leader and going, well, it was someone who was running a setting and they'd hired a leader, and they were going, they're great on this bit and this bit, and they've not quite got this bit, or they're working on this bit. Is there anything you can, how did you nail that down, or how did you get there? And I just went, it's a very weird Venn diagram to overlap to find somebody that is got the right balance of empathy and nature connection and childcare awareness and business savvy and all these things. And I think one of the things that does, sometimes we talk about, I think you need a certain amount of this isn't the right word. You need a certain amount of chutzpah to do forest school, because we are still slightly on the back foot in terms of it as an industry, to sort of maybe not defend ourselves anymore, but to kind of keep championing. We're not yet at a place where we can rest and go, everybody knows what this thing is. And that kind of leads you down a point of going, okay, you've done your level 3. You need that level of chutzpah to get you into, and now I'm going to go and look at whittling, and now I'm going to go and do, and that's not to say that the CPD has to be going to a face-to-face course. Podcasts are CPD, audiobooks are CPD, going to conferences, just, even if you don't do the workshops, going to the conference is CPD. As I always think of it, as because I'm just how my brain works, of just meeting people, and it's like adding to your Rolodex and going, oh, I could probably pick that person's brain next time I've got a question about green woodworking, or I sent someone a message today about storytelling just out of the blue, and I've just listened to this podcast. Can you tell me about this thing, or can you talk to me about this? And actually just meeting and building that kind of, I think, Sarah, Lawful, you've often referred to it as the mycelium effect, of we're all just this big thing together.
Yeah. I think there is that understanding that has grown with Forest School. Forest School has grown in a very organic way, and Sarah Collins and I talk about the mycelium effect with the Nature Premium campaign, when we're building connections and finding people who can help us, build that. But certainly with Forest School, there's a sense that there's a forest growing across the country. And actually Forest School is, the way we're doing it here in the UK, that is spreading to other countries. We've got people who Sarah and I've been working with. Someone is going back to Italy and is taking the way we do Forest School in the UK back over to Italy, where they're doing some kind of Forest School, nature school. And I think there's something very exciting about that the organic growth means we have generally got, we talk on training, don't we, about growth mindset and closed mindset. And I think when I did my training, there was a sense that you did your training and then you had your Forest School badge and then you ran Forest School. And there was less of an emphasis on ongoing learning and development. And I think training has developed. So, I was lucky enough to be part of the trainers network, and I learned off loads of people. And then we linked in with IOL, and then IOL helped us create the special interest group. And then we became the FSA. And I have learned so much from all the trainers around the country who work in lots of different ways, and discovering that there's not one way to do anything. There's tons of different ways. And the more you learn, in a way, the less you know.
Yeah.
And yet when I first learned, and I thought, well, this is how you do this at Forest School. And I think that happens with our learning when we learn all sorts of things. When you learn to drive, you're going to go, this is the way I've got to do this thing, actually you meet somebody who's at the top of their game, and there will always be people who are constantly learning. They won't tell you this is the way you do this thing. They'll be open to new ways and new ideas, and they'll constantly be curious and asking questions. And I think if we're behaving like that as forest school leaders in the woods with the children, we're curious, and we share the things that we're learning, we share the things that we struggle with. Actually, we role model how to be great learners. And that's the thing that the conference does brilliantly, because we get a whole bunch of us together and we'll say, well, I'm passionate about this, I'm interested in this, I want to learn about this, I'm not so sure about that. I constantly am confessing to my trainees when they come on training, my tool skills are competent enough. I am not passionate about using tools. I'm not super confident in making and building, and I do enough to teach them and to work with children in the woods. I'm not super interested in making things, but I have brilliant colleagues who are really skilled at craft, who are really skilled at tools. I often get Dave Watson to come and help. He's a great person up in Derbyshire, and he'll be at the conference running workshops. And I'll often say to Dave, will you come and run your Sharp Tools Day for my forest school trainees? Because you really know the stuff and you're passionate about it. And I learn off him every time, and we don't need to be brilliant at everything. And we also need to have the confidence. Strong on this, I'm less strong on that. And the more we're honest with the people we're training or the groups we're working with, the more we actually show this about that. I just love it. I really love it. And I'm so thrilled to be, to be an endorsed trainer means that I'm in the group where there's a whole bunch of trainers who are really skilled and knowledgeable, and they're sharing their passions and their skills and their knowledge. Lots of them will be at the conference. Some of them are running workshops, which will be brilliant. And I know Nell and Charlotte are going to be at the conference talking about the endorsed trainers, the idea of it, why we're doing it, and how we're learning from each other. So there will be an opportunity at the conference for anyone who's interested in, how do I become a forest school trainer? What are the routes to become a forest school trainer? And why would I want to be an endorsed trainer? Mm-hmm. So that'll be on offer at the conference as well. I really recommend anyone who's wondering about that to go along and find Nell and Charlotte. It'll be good fun and interesting. And it might even help us, because you might ask questions that we need to think about.
Yeah. Thinking about, it's so interesting, isn't it? That idea of like continually learning and being really honest about that, rather than having to pretend to know everything. And, even when you're working in mainstream education, you sort of have those moments, don't you, where it's like somebody asks you, a student asks you a question, you don't know the answer, but you're honest about that. Great question, like, let's look that up together. But with something so broad as forest school, you really, as you're describing, Sarah, get experts in a particular thing, or people who are particularly passionate about one element of forest school, and some people whose knowledge in that area may be much more patchy, and to be kind of really honest with everyone that you're working with, as you say, not just the children that you might be working with, but the adults that you're training, or members of staff from a school that you might work with, and just have the honesty to be able to go, do you know what? Absolutely no idea. It doesn't mean I'm a bad forest school leader by any means. It means that I'm, continually learning. I think that's really interesting. Thinking about kind of CPD that has helped us on our journeys as forest school leaders, like Sarah Walker, are there any particular sort of learning moments, whether it is like an organised CPD event that you've attended, or whether it's something you followed just through your own line of inquiry? Is there any kind of area of CPD that you've found particularly valuable, or kind of penny drop moment or anything like that?
I think for me, it's sort of connecting with what Sarah was saying just earlier as well, is the fact that because a lot of my forest school experience and learning has been very organic. So it's not like when you're a mainstream teacher, you do this and then you do your PGC, and it feels very structured, and it feels more like there's a sort of a hierarchy to being a teacher and training, and you've got that sort of management level as well, or certainly the schools I worked in. So I think because the forest school community is a lot more organic, and when you go to a conference or a training event, as we've just said, there are experts and there are non-experts, but we're all good at something, and that something is all very different. For me, it is that informal training, that talking to other people, observing someone else, going to someone else's site, which is something we do a lot of in our local Forest School Association group. So I think for me, it's been more the sort of penny drop has been that openness, that you don't have to sort of have this hierarchy and as you say, sort of pretend that we know all the answers, because clearly we don't, and nobody can possibly know everything from all the the wide areas of forest school. So I think that for me is one of the huge strengths of forest school training in general.
Support the podcast today by becoming a Patreon member at childrenoftheforest.com. Check out the podcast links for more details.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Gemma?
I have, preparing for the podcast is my CPD.
Yeah.
A lot of the time. So sometimes we'll do an episode like this where it's just having a chat with other practitioners, and you always learn something from having those chats. But whenever we decide to do a deep dive on something, we'll choose it because one or both of us is interested in a particular topic, and then we'll go away and research it. And because there is, we're recording on this date and we're absolutely doing it, and I know that we'll bounce off each other in the discussion, that it kind of gives if you're a bit disorganized like I am most of the time and busy like we all are, you can go, oh yeah, I really want to read about play, or I really feel like I need to know a bit more about fungi, and you won't necessarily get around to it if you don't have a kind of date in the diary to kind of not present your work, but actually talk about what you found out. But even before we did the podcast, kind of when we were packing up on a Friday afternoon, that's when we used to kind of info dump on each other anyway, wasn't it? Which is why we started doing the podcast, because we were like, oh, we're talking about this really in-depth stuff. Maybe one other person might be interested in listening to it, so we may as well record it.
And they were.
And they were.
And they still are.
One single person. Thanks, John. So that at the moment has been really invaluable and kind of given it substance, I guess. What about you?
I almost think it's not quite the opposite, but I think a penny drop moment for me has been realizing that CPD, I think Sarah Walker, you were just saying, the idea of CPD when you're in like indoor teaching is very like, you go and do this 1-day course, or you go and do this 2-day course. And that's what I thought the CPD was. My idea was, when are you doing CPD? You're doing it from when you arrive at the hotel meeting room at 9 and you finish your CPD at 4.
And you get the certificate.
And that's
biscuits.
And that's when you've really...
And you switch off after at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah. And I think the as you say, Jim, the preparing for the podcast bit is actually sometimes the most difficult thing is reading something that has, or listening to something that has such a profound influence that you go, I just need to digest that for a couple of days, and trying to find that balance between, oh my God, I've got this audiobook to listen to, it's 8 hours long, and I've got 2 weeks to listen to it. But every time I listen to 10 minutes, I go, oh my God, this has changed my whole worldview. I need to go and run like 5 more sessions now. And that actually the CPD is happening when you take that thing and try and do it. So I think my previous view would have been, that CPD happens. I am now, particularly in teaching, it's like, I've got a certificate in letters and sounds phonics, or I've got a CPD in, you take something even more physical, maybe even like, I did PIPS training. Do you do PIPS? That's like the safe restraints. I'm using air quotes here, right? Because that's a whole thing. CPD day, but actually, because most of that training is about avoiding getting to that stuff. and you think, oh, I've done the CPD day, I've got it. But actually, it happens when you try and do it. It happens when you try and diffuse situations. It happens when you see someone doing a type of play that you've been reading about. And similarly, the podcast is us sort of info dumping, but also when you have to, now that we've since becoming trainers, realizing that when you go, oh, let me try and explain it to you, and your brain is synthesizing, and you realize that actually you're doing quite a lot of learning when you have to explain it to someone. And I think that is what Forest School has that not a lot of other professions have. I've seen it done actually recently with music, where they go, here's a concept, and then they had these 5 learners, and they said, okay, can you teach it to someone who's never touched a piano? Can you teach it to someone who's touched, who's been having lessons for a year, who's been playing for, and now can you teach it to an expert? And all of our Forest School practice has that in it, whether it's social emotional stuff, and you need to get that across to a 3-year-old and a 13-year-old, or it's something about some sort of nature connection thing, and you're trying to get that across to somebody, a parent in their 40s, but you're also trying to simultaneously explain it to the 5-year-old that they've come to the toddler group with. That's a massive moment of CPD where you go, right, can you actually put this stuff into practice?
Yeah.
And through that process, you're having to really think about it and question yourself and question your beliefs. And I think that's certainly one thing that my Forest School leader training taught me, probably for the first time ever, was to actually question stuff, that question my beliefs and question what I thought worked and question what I thought I'd been doing. So I think with the teacher training I'd done, you're sort of taught these methods, and you go to sort of method workshops for, I don't know, for example, in my case, using songs communicatively to teach English, as a foreign language, or you go to, I don't know, sort of very sort of method based, but actually nobody. So you have this sort of, you've got to memorize it. You've got to remember everything they said and then sort of take it off to your classroom and do it. And I think even all through my education at school, I don't think I ever learnt to question anything I did. It was about learning it, remembering it, and reproducing it. And I think in that sense, the Forest School leader training and subsequent sort of CPD, formal, informal, has just really taught me to question a lot about what I believe and what I think I know. And I think that's probably for me one of the most valuable things about wanting to do the training, because I genuinely wanted to do it, and I hadn't been told to do it by my manager.
Yeah.
But also just being in an environment where you can question and query your beliefs.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, Sarah Lawful, you might have some thoughts on this. I was going, oh, I wonder if that makes Forest School leaders as a breed, if we're great students because we don't expect the teachers to be experts in things, we're very laid back. Oh, right, that's fine. Oh, okay, Or are we awful students because we're constantly going, but does that work? Why? Can I ask you about this thing?
What about if you do it this way?
I know you're teaching me this, but what if I come up with a better idea at the same time?
But what's your definition of a good student? One who passes the exam with all the top grades, or a student that learns? So there you got another question in a question there.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that, isn't it? Because I think this is where that brilliant synergy between early years and Forest School is so fabulous, because in an early years, in a great early years setting, children are owning their learning. And yet somehow as they get older, the teachers own the learning, the school owns the learning, the curriculum owns the learning in a way. And children who I would teach in early years, who are so competent, smart, resilient, resourceful, independent, would get up into year 2 and year 3, and they were waiting for somebody to sharpen their pencil, or they didn't, or teachers were telling them off for thinking independently. There was that as well. So it's what do we consider learning and education to be about? So in terms of when somebody comes on a CPD course I'm running, or Forest School training or whatever, I would much rather have the messiness of an early years classroom where you've got independent learning, really great questions being asked, tricky questions being asked, and it took me a while to realize that if we absolutely ran the training the way Forest School works, and I as the trainer took my control away, and instead of trying to control what was happening, I asked the questions and I facilitated and I gave the resources, and I then invited all those brilliant people that were on the training to share what they know and their skills and their knowledge. It looks way messier than it used to, but their learning is so much deeper. And I think, I discovered that you absolutely can run training the way we would lead a Forest School session. We need to do it. We need to make sure that the training resources are tight, and that we have good structures provided in different ways. And this is where I've benefited hugely from Sarah Walker coming and getting involved in the training with me, because she brings all her skill and all her knowledge from years of teacher training and working in different cultures around the world. So, she brings that brilliance to our training. So I'm learning all the time about how to do the training. So, can I be cheeky and go back to your earlier question about CPD? Because, having Sarah training with me gives me massive amounts of CPD. I guess in the way Gemma and Lewis, the way you work together, you'll have different things you do and different questions you ask. That's CPD, isn't it? It's that. It's exciting, but it's messy.
Yeah. And it's also, I think, learning in that way is so much less, it feels less taxing. That thing of going to sit in a conference hall and being talked at with a PowerPoint for a really long time. Physically, it's less demanding, but actually, I always remember leaving them absolutely wiped.
Right, yeah.
Whereas when I'm using all the air quotes in the world now, just been playing, right? Because we all love that phrase. That you sort of come out at the end of it feeling like you've got more energy a lot of the time. And I think that will be something that going to the conference will give for me, is that kind of feeling of, you can't play if you don't feel safe. You have to feel safe to a degree. Having those workshop leaders and people who have got a level of expertise or a passion in a certain area sort of then will make me feel more comfortable about playing in that area. It's very different. You take something physically risky like we at the local meetups have done axe carving with Martin, who's amazing. And I would try things there with Martin's supervision that I wouldn't try on my own. Because it's that support, that level of, it's not quite guidance, it's kind of support, it's like a safety net that you get when you are in the presence of somebody who's gone deep into a subject area.
Yeah.
And being able to ask the questions at the time that you want to ask the questions, rather than there being this is a lecture or a training session on whatever, and this is the format, and this is where we'll be at 11 o'clock, and then we'll have a coffee break, and then we're going to learn this. So that's sort of the way that Forest School training seems to happen as it grows, and people ask questions and go off at tangents and come back, because you're asking stuff that is relevant to you at that moment in that situation. So it's going to be more valuable and memorable than just doing it because it's on the timetable at that point.
Yeah. Just the specificity of being able to, we for a while ran a kindergarten, and so a lot of the training we had to do was aimed at indoor early years teachers, nursery workers. And the amount of times that we had to kind of ask for, not compensation, but like adjustment, like, oh, right, but what if our toilet is in a tent? Oh, right, but what if it's raining when we're supposed to be doing phonics? Oh, but whereas going to stuff at the conference which is run by Forest School leaders, it's already tailored. Now if you go on a bat walk and they go, okay, well, you get your £4,000 bat walk out. You go, oh, what if I've got a kid that wants to hold it in their 8? What's that version? Being able to go to people who are like, I know what Forest School is. let me show you how this works in a forest school sense, it's just going to be a huge weight off of our shoulders as learners.
I wanted to ask if there's are all of the kind of workshop leaders already signed up, or are there is there still, if somebody's listening to this and thinks, oh, you know, we've been talking about how teaching other people your particular passion or skill is an amazing way for you to learn and like hone your practice. And if someone's listening to this and thinks, oh, maybe I'll be brave and like actually lead a workshop at the conference, are all the slots filled now, or is there still space if somebody wanted to sign up now?
I think Kyle and Kim might shoot me if I said anyone can just offer a workshop. But at this point in time, because we're pretty close, and I think we've got lots of fabulous workshops. It may be though that there's a play zone which is going to have all kinds of opportunities for people to share skills. So the idea of that is that people can turn up and share their skills and play together and learn off each other. So that might be the more appropriate thing at this point. But please do, if you are listening to this and you think, actually, I really wish I was running a workshop, you know, do get in touch with us at the FSA, because even if you don't do it this year, we could have you poised for next year or the year after. So we really see this as a way of drawing together members from all around the country and getting them sharing their skills and their knowledge. So thank you for that question, Gemma. I think it's a great question. I don't think this is the point for us to have loads of new offers. Those have been going out for many months, but do get in touch with us and say, well, you know, I'm interested in running one next year. That was a great, you know, the conference that we last had near Box Hill, it was so brilliant in the pouring rain. I mean, the team from Surrey and Suffolk, have I got that round the right way? I believe so. They did an amazing job, and there was such a rich variety of workshops for people to do. It was quite brilliant in the pouring rain, and we still had a fabulous time.
That sounds good. I'm excited about the play zone. That's great. Is that like a kind of, you know, with tools kind of play zone, like practical skills? Is that kind of... I believe
so. There'll be ropes and slack lines and all kinds of things.
Oh my goodness. Okay, great. I'm excited now. So if somebody wants to find out more about the conference, we can put links and stuff in the show notes, but just literally Googling FSA conference will get them.
I can't promise you that will work, but I do know that it was going to go out in the bulletin and it was going to be on the website, and there is a conference Facebook page. Again, I'm a bit useless on the social media front, but we can make sure that you've got that information to go out to everybody. That would be really super. And
do you have to be a member to come? You don't, do you?
No, absolutely not. And in fact, we over the last few conferences, we've had people turn up who are not forest school leaders, people who are interested in forest school for their schools or for their children. We've had people quite a lot of times have come from other countries. That's probably not going to happen this year. But we've got some wonderful workshops that are being run by people who are not forest school leaders. And I think that's a really valuable thing that happens, that we do draw on a wealth of experience and knowledge from people in other spheres. So I think it's a really great way that as the forest community, we gather together, but with a very open mind.
Yeah. Great. And Sarah Walker, if people want to find out more about your work as a freelance forest school leader, where can they find out about you?
So I'm a recognised provider. So if you go onto the Forest School Association website, and it's I'm trying to remember what it says now. Does it say something like find a forest school leader near you or something? There's a map with pins on. So you can contact me that way. I'm in the lengthy process of getting a website set up, but it won't be anything flash. It'll be an electronic business card, really. So the best thing is just to email through that Forest School Association website.
Excellent.
Great.
Oh, thank you so much, guys, for giving your time on a Friday evening. It's great to speak to you.
Thank you for having us. It's
Thank
been
you so
great
much.
to meet you.
Thank you.
And we'll see you both at the conference.
Yeah.
And we're
Yes.
excited that you are going to be doing a podcast at the conference.
Yeah.
We are. Gemma and I are going to be wandering around with microphones.
Yeah. We've got one roving microphone
got
so far.
this one.
We're going to get another one.
For walking around and properly being professional and interviewing people.
Yes.
So if you see us while we're wandering around, please do come and have a chat with us.
I think we need some
Conference.
funny hats so that we're visible from a distance. I think I might be in charge of finding those hats.
Oh,
I think you're going to be really pleased with what I choose. Right. Okay, here I come.
Great.
It's going to be amazing.
Okay.
They're going to be really large to stand out in a crowd as well.
Well, they need to. I've got the biggest head known to me. I have to order a special bike helmet because I can't buy a bike helmet from a shop.
Wow.
My head's too big, and I haven't got hair, so I can't claim that it's
God.
like.
What was it like when you had dreadlocks? How was that even possible?
Oh, I didn't wear a helmet. I assumed that my dreadlocks
Oh, well, yeah.
were the helmet.
Had the impact.
Yeah,
Right.
that was my plan. Right.
Guys, thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
If you like this podcast and want to support more episodes, you can donate through Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Children of the Forest to show your support for the Forest School podcast.